Hello YouTube, my name is David Frankal and I have run this channel for the last 5 years. Today, I'm seeking re-election to be owner of this democratic channel. I've just come back from 2 months of interrailing and right now I have a severe video backlog, and that backlog is stopping me from getting on with other things like making more of the David Frankal show. So elect me and I will get the backlog done so we can move forward together as a channel. But David, the backlog is like 100 videos. How are you going to get all that done? Well, if you elect me, I will get it done by the end of January. No, it won't. It's going to take years. What you have to do is believe. Believe in the backlog. You just don't sound like you believe enough. Also, can I just mention, the backlog's only really been a problem since 2017. You've run this channel for 5 years. Why has the David Frankal show never been weekly? Well, actually, I don't like that question, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to distract everyone's attention from it by saying that if you elect me, by the end of this episode, there will be 88 more episodes of the David Frankal show. What do you mean 88 more? This is episode 88. 87 episodes already exist. How can you say it's 88 more episodes? Well, this fact checker says I'm right. Well, I guess you can't argue with a fact checker. Well, there you go, and that's why you can place your trust in me. Sorry, Dom, can we edit that laughter out? It makes me look bad. Thanks. And that's why you can place your trust in me.
Hello and welcome to the David Frankal Show.
David, that's clearly an old clip. Really? Thought nobody would notice. Hello and welcome to the David Frankal Show. I'm here in Muscat after having spent 3 weeks in Manchester campaigning for the Liberal Democrats in Cheadle. The general election results are now in and they are, well, pretty much the worst possible results imaginable. Boris Johnson now has an 80-seat majority, and that's not just an 80-seat majority of Tories, because all the decent and principled Tories have been purged from the party. That's an 80-seat majority of Boris Johnson loyalists, which basically means his government will have no scrutiny whatsoever. This, perhaps more than any government before, will be a government of no consequences, and if you don't believe me, just look at the general election campaign. Jacob Rees-Mogg going on the radio and saying the people who died in the Grenfell Tower fire did so because they lacked common sense and they followed the instructions of the emergency services. No consequences. Andrew Bridgen doubling down and saying that Jacob Rees-Mogg wouldn't have died because he was more intelligent and that therefore he deserves to be in power. No consequences. Lying about building 40 new hospitals when in reality the government has allocated enough money to upgrade 6. No consequences. Lying about 50,000 new nurses when 19,000 of them are already existing nurses. No consequences. Promising 20,000 new police but ignoring the fact that the government have cut 21,000 police since 2010. No consequences. Lying about homelessness. No consequences. Ducking the Andrew Neil interview, no consequences. Ducking the climate debate, which was attended by every other major party leader, no consequences. Doctoring videos of Keir Starmer and Jess Phillips, no consequences. Rebranding their Twitter account into Fact Check UK to try and convince people they were a real independent fact checker, a strongly worded warning from Twitter, but apart from that, no consequences. And if all that's not enough, just look at the Prime Minister himself. Calling gay men tank-topped bum boys and suggesting marriage between 2 men was the same as allowing marriage between 3 men and a dog. No consequences. Letterboxes, bank robbers, pickaninnies with watermelon smile, Barack Obama having an ancestral dislike of the British Empire. No consequences. Suggesting children brought up by single mothers were ill-raised, ignorant, aggressive and illegitimate. No consequences. Getting the sentence of a UK citizen unfairly imprisoned in Iran lengthened. No consequences. Having previously been sacked twice for lying. No consequences. Lying about never having lied during your political campaign. No consequences. Lying about Brexit allowing us to give an extra £350 million per week to the NHS. No consequences. Rephrasing that same lie just a few months ago when he suggested extending Article 50 will cost the UK billions of pounds per month. No consequences. Lying about Turkey joining the EU, no consequences. Conspiring to have a journalist beat up, no consequences. The hypocrisy of blaming other parties for delaying Brexit when he himself voted against the May deal twice, no consequences. Saying that no Prime Minister could ever sign up to a deal that separates Northern Ireland from Great Britain and puts a customs border in the Irish Sea, then coming back from Brussels with a deal that separates Northern Ireland from Great Britain and puts a customs border in the Irish Sea. No consequences. Lying about whether or not his deal puts a customs border in the Irish Sea, no consequences. Illegally proroguing Parliament, no consequences. Lying to the public about why Parliament was prorogued, no consequences. Lying to the Queen about why Parliament was prorogued, no consequences. Withholding a report into Russian interference in UK democracy, no consequences. And so on and so on and so on. Of course, I could just stand here and keep piling on the Tory party because, quite frankly, I hate them and I wanted them to lose, but my God, we need to talk about what a shit show the other parties have been. Starting with the Liberal Democrats, from the start of the campaign their messaging has just been, well, bad. Revoking Article 50 without a referendum was a terrible policy and went down with voters about as badly as it deserved to. Promoting the idea of Jo Swinson as a potential Prime Minister instead of accepting the reality of first past the post made them look ridiculous. Saying they'd refuse to put either Johnson or Corbyn into number 10 in a hung parliament made them look untrustworthy. Not that either of them actually deserved to be Prime Minister, obviously. And sadly, many of the really great policies the Lib Dems actually have, like legalising marijuana, lowering the voting age to 16, electoral reform, increased childcare, freezing rail fares, they weren't really talked about at all. The reason there's this perception that it was a very bad night for the Lib Dems is because they were polling very highly just a couple of weeks ago. But actually, compared to the 2017 general election, the national vote share went up by 57%, which is no small feat. But thanks to the magic of first past the post, they ended up with one less seat than in 2017. Of course, the pinnacle of the Lib Dems' misery on election night was this year's Portillo moment, where leader Jo Swinson lost her East Dunbartonshire seat to the SNP by 149 votes.
Amy Callaghan, Scottish National Party, SNP, 19,672. Jo Swinson, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 19,523.
Then let's talk about the Labour Party, which has been not so much wounded in this election, but totally and completely annihilated. They lost a total of 60 seats, most of which were supposedly Labour heartland seats like Blythe Valley, which had been Labour since 1931, Lee, Andy Burnham's old seat, Sedgefield, Tony Blair's old seat. Basically a swathe of rural, working class and former mining areas across the north and the Midlands. The result was Labour's worst defeat in living memory. Perhaps the one good thing to come out of all of this is that Jeremy Corbyn will finally resign and maybe, just maybe, Labour might put somebody electable in charge of the party. The sad thing about Corbyn is that I actually did like quite a lot of his policies. I think austerity needs to end. I think raising corporation tax and taxing the top 5% is a sensible way to increase tax revenue. When it comes to the environment, Labour have successfully swooped in to adopt the climate movement, adopting a carbon neutrality target by 2030. Contrast that to the Lib Dems' rather pitiful target of 2045. On the other hand, as a Jew, I felt as though the Labour Party were doing pretty much everything they could for me not to vote for them. For the past 4 years, the state of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party has been absolutely appalling. Just recently you had the hounding out of Louise Ellman from the party. The absolutely pathetic response to the chief rabbi's statement just a few weeks ago was really eye-opening. The first instinct of so many people in the party is just to go immediately on the offensive, attack his credibility, attack his political leanings, instead of just, sort of listening and accepting that maybe there's a problem. Instead of having a bit of self-reflection, Jeremy Corbyn just refuses to apologise 4 times on Andrew Neil. That's the problem.
Wouldn't you like to take this opportunity tonight to apologise to the British Jewish community for what's happened?
What I'll say is this. I am determined that our society will be safe for people of all faiths. I don't want anyone to be feeling insecure in our society. And our government will protect every community against the abuse they receive on the streets, on the trains, or in any other form of life.
Try one more time.
No, hang on a minute, Andrew. Can I explain what we're trying to do?
You have, and you've been given plenty of time to do it. I asked you if you wanted to apologise.
Andrew, I don't want anyone to go through what anyone has gone through.
And you've said that several times. I understand that, Mr. Corbyn. I was asking you about an apology.
And there are far too many people who really just don't get it. And simply responding, oh yeah, well, the Tories are Islamophobic, is not a good response. I know the Tories are Islamophobic. I hate the Tories too. In fact, I hate the Tories significantly more than Labour, which was why, if I was in a Labour-Tory seat, Despite all this, I would have still voted Labour. But why should I have to choose between two forms of bigotry? I shouldn't have to be voting for a party I can't stand to stop a party I really despise from getting in. Perhaps the next Labour leader's most difficult task will be rooting out the anti-Semitism in their party and regaining the broken trust of the Jewish community. And with that, there's at least one reason to be glad that the next election won't be for another 5 years. Another major change we need to see from Labour is for them to finally start supporting electoral reform. If there was ever an election that proved how much electoral reform is needed, it's this one. The Conservatives with 44% of the vote won 56% of the seats. In contrast, the Lib Dems with 12% of the vote won less than 2% of the seats. If that isn't bad enough, just look at the average number of votes per seat for the various parties. For the Conservatives, the figure is 38,000. For Labour, it's 51,000. For the SNP, it's as low as 26,000. And here's where it starts to get really mad. For the Liberal Democrats, the average number of votes per seat was 331,000. Even worse than that, for the Green Party, the average number of votes per seat was 858,000. And by that, I obviously mean they got 858,000 votes nationally because they only won one seat. First past the post is an absolute disgrace of an electoral system. Tactical voting did have some effect across the country. Rosie Duffield was able to hold on to her seat in Canterbury, partially thanks to the local Liberal Democrats basically refusing to campaign for the candidate that was forced on them at the last minute. Tactical voting also helped Labour gain Putney from the Conservatives, one of the few Labour gains across the country. And tactical voting also helped the Liberal Democrats gain Richmond Park from Zac Goldsmith. Good riddance to him. On the other hand, the Lib Dems failed to unseat Raab or Redwood, Labour failed to unseat Ian Duncan-Smith, and the Green candidate in Stroud was able to attract enough Labour votes to let the Tory win there. Not to mention the effect of vote splitting in three-way marginal seats like Southport, Kensington and Westminster, all of which were won by the Tories. Now, of course, I'm not making a general point about first past the post as a way to complain about this specific election result, rather I'm using this specific election result to make a general point about first past the post. The fact is, under the system we have, Boris Johnson is the legitimate winner. He has a majority in Parliament, he will be Prime Minister for the next 5 years, the UK will leave the EU next year. There will be no second referendum, Remain is dead. Better luck next time, guys, I guess. Also, quick side note, another thing we learned from this election is that leaving your political party is essentially a death sentence for your political career. Over the last few years, we've had an unprecedented number of MPs leaving their parties, some of which remained independent, some of which formed a new political party called Change UK, some of which would later go on to join the Liberal Democrats. Then just within the last few months, you had 22 Conservative MPs who either quit the party or were expelled for supporting the Benn Act. 10 of those later rejoined the Conservatives, some stood down at the election, others ran as independents or as Lib Dem candidates. So in the election campaign, you had Labour turned Lib Dems like Chuka Umunna running in Westminster, Luciana Berger running in Finchley and Golders Green, ex-Tory Lib Dem candidates like Sam Gyimah running in Kensington, former Conservative turned Change UK candidate Anna Soubry, former Conservative turned independent candidates like David Gauke and Dominic Grieve, and former Labour MP turned independent Ivan Lewis. Not one single one of them were able to hold on to their seat. As a result, I suspect the next Parliament will have significantly less defections. But moving on from all that, so as I said, I've been in Manchester for 3 weeks. I've mainly been campaigning with the Lib Dems in Cheadle with our candidate Tom Morrison. That's mainly consisted of canvassing, delivering and stuffing envelopes and other menial work around the office, but it was still great fun and I met a great team of people. Whilst in Manchester, I popped up to Lancaster to the day to see some friends. That also happened to be on the day the new TransPennine Express Nova 2s entered service. It all went pretty well until we got stuck at Preston for an hour. I also took part in the climate strike on the 29th of November. As usual with these protests, people are sort of invited up to do impromptu speeches, and so I decided to do one. The BBC, who I didn't even know were there at the time, seemed to like mine, so I ended up on the news at 10.
Our science correspondent Victoria Gill reports now from Manchester.
We care about our future, and we demand that those in power care about it as well.
Another Friday, another climate strike. And as the scale of this movement grows, its message is becoming increasingly urgent. Youth strikers are trying to put an impending environmental crisis at the top of world leaders' agendas.
I also met up with Joel Hardy to revisit the Stockport to Stalybridge parliamentary train, which as of May 2018 now runs both ways, Although apparently it goes from Stalybridge to Stockport and back and not Stockport to Stalybridge and back, so when I went from Stockport to Stalybridge I was quite annoyed to realise I'd have to go back the long way round. Also, while I was at Stockport, I spotted this, the Conservative battle bus. As it turns out, Boris Johnson actually visited the Cheadle constituency that day, although he didn't really go out in public. He just went to a high school football field to film some stupid vox pop about funding football fields. Then of course came election night, where I took part in the count for the Cheadle constituency, which took place at Stockport Town Hall. This mainly involved me watching the people counting the votes to make sure they didn't make any mistakes, or at least any mistakes that would have affected us. Of course, we also watched as the results came in nationally, and at about 4:30 the results were announced for Cheadle. Our candidate Tom Morrison won 23,000 votes, up from 19,000 for Mark Hunter in 2017, but the Conservative candidate Mary Robinson won 25,000 votes, up from 24,000 in 2017. Labour, meanwhile, won 6,000 votes, so if you're one of the people who voted Labour in Cheadle, congratulations, well done, enjoy 5 years with a Tory MP, you've earned it. Well, there you have it. That was the December 2019 UK general election, the one Tony Blair warned was a bear trap for Labour, and what do you know, he was right. The SNP, by the way, won 48 out of the 59 seats in Scotland, so no doubt Scottish independence will once again be a fiercely discussed topic in the next 5 years. Labour and the Liberal Democrats are looking for new leaders, and the rest of us can strap in for 5 years of Boris Johnson, Brexit, austerity, and a gaping hole where political integrity used to be. Because this is the future we built. Congratulations. Cheers all. Tune in a few weeks' time for the end of year special. In the meantime, thank you for watching and please subscribe.